She broke her only biscuit in two, offering every crumb to a stranger, and the desert seemed to pause, listening. The July sun pressed on the Mancos flats until every sage leaf curled like a dry tongue. 12 freight wagons crawled west, canvas hoops quivering in heat that blurred distance into shivering water. In the last wagon rode Josie May, 6 years old, black, barefoot, carrying no family but a memory. Fever had buried her parents beside the Arkansas crossing. Aunt Lila, hollow-eyed from grief, now counted Josie only when chores needed smaller hands. Hidden beneath Josie's patched shirt, wrapped in a faded kerchief, lay her treasure, a sweet milk biscuit baked by her mother 3 months earlier. It was rimmed with cracks, scent barely clinging, yet it held the sound of lullabies and the warmth of vanished kitchens. She had promised herself to taste it only when all gone truly meant all. By late afternoon, the caravan met a dry wash choked with broken shale. Oxen balked, shaking yokes. Men cursed. Women stared at empty water casks, whispering like gourds. Josie slipped from the tailgate, the ground branding her soles. She searched for shade that might forgive small bones, and found a lone piñon leaning east, offering a sliver of cool. She sat, unwrapped the biscuit, closed her eyes, breathed in sugar and memory. Hoof sounds stitched the silence, soft, deliberate, as if stitched by someone who understood quiet. 3 Apache scouts appeared on a ridge, a lean knot of riders in sun-bleached buckskin, no war paint, no lifted rifles. They studied the stalled wagons, reading thirst the way traders read ledgers. The lead scout dismounted, walking the slope with the calm of a man used to watching clouds drift rather than forcing them to rain. Josie rose. Heartbeats filled her ears like drum rolls, but her feet stayed. She stepped from piñon shade and stretched her small arm, biscuit gleaming gold against the red dust. It looked absurdly tiny between vast sky and taller fears. The scout stopped before her, eyes level, though his shadow swallowed hers. He accepted the biscuit between 2 fingers, lowering his head in a brief bow. With a bone blade, he split it clean. Crumbs flashed in sun. He offered half back. Josie shook her head. All yours. A flicker, respect or sorrow, crossed his face. He ate the gift slowly, then tucked the seeds and crumbs into a rawhide pouch at his belt, as though planting a promise. Wind danced through the feathers at his braid. They stood a breath longer, child and stranger bound by bread and heat, until shouting broke uphill. Wagon guards had seen the meeting. Muskets jerked from hooks. Voices barked orders made of dust and fear. The Apache leader raised an open palm, no threat, then gave a signal. Riders wheeled, melting into rippled air, with the softness of leaves falling into tall grass. No arrow loosed, no word returned, only a silence that felt too deliberate to ignore. That night the camp's fires burned low. Tongues tasted dust more than talk. Aunt Lila scolded Josie and whispers cracked like old paint, calling her reckless, calling her kind, but foolish. Josie listened, kerchief now empty in her pocket, wrist light as sky. Just before dawn, the earth began to hum, a steady hoof-beat roll, neither rushed nor hiding. 30 Apache riders formed a half-moon facing the wagons, pack horses breathing clouds into the gray air. The same leader rode forward. Without flourish, he placed a water skin at the wagon master's boots, then another, then burlap sacks bulging with cornmeal and strips of dried venison. He spoke one word, gift, turned, and the line dissolved into first light, hooves kissing dust so gently the ground kept the secret. Settlers stared at bounty heavier than any rifle. Oxen drank until knees trembled. Cornmeal thickened into porridge. Fear loosened, yet shame tightened, for mercy had worn the face they'd raised guns against. Only Josie met no one's eyes. She stood beside the empty wash, feeling beads of sunrise on her lashes and hearing the tiniest echo inside the rawhide pouch she did not carry. The hush of seeds waiting to root. The water stretched 2 more days than anyone dared to predict. Cornmeal simmered each dawn, turning kettles fragrant, turning panic into something that could be chewed. Oxen bellies filled, children's lips pinked, and rifles, though never unloaded, lay flatter against the wagon sides. Even so, fear is a weed. It sends up new shoots the moment gratitude looks away. Word drifted down trail that a mining posse had pitched camp near Horseshoe Arroyo. 8 armed men with empty pans and quick tempers. Hawthorne, the wagon master, pushed longer miles, hunting safer ground before dust and rumor collided. Wheels groaned, sinews burned, and the gift water sank to its last skins. On the 4th dusk, a blood-orange moon climbed ragged cliffs, and the caravan stopped beside a bone-dry ravine. The cracked channel ran black with shadow. No sound of frogs, no glint of seep. Hawthorne ordered fires low, barrels rationed to mouthfuls. That night grief felt heavy again. The children's whispers sounded like nails tapping pine. Josie lay awake under the wagon, fingers tracing the empty kerchief, replaying how the scout had folded crumbs into his pouch, as though planting them in faith, not hunger. Her wrist ached for weight. The gap felt larger than thirst. Past midnight, a soft drumming rose. An echo first, then real. Sentinels froze, rifles half lifted, but the hoofbeats held no rattle of canteens, no clink of spurs. 30 Apache returned, more than before, silhouettes silvered by moon. They halted beyond rifle reach, forming 2 long rows that framed the wash like gateposts. The same tall leader dismounted, carrying something rolled beneath his arm, a hide stretched flat by thin cedar rods, its surface alive with beads that caught moonlight, turquoise for water, bone white for dry flats, orange for wind-cut passes. He set it on the cracked earth, then stepped back, waiting. Hawthorne advanced alone, palms open. No words. The leader gestured once, slow, deliberate for the child. A hush swept camp like sudden frost. Aunt Lila clutched at Josie's shoulder, but the girl felt the tug of those beads, shimmering answers to questions her mouth could not phrase. She walked forward barefoot, dust cool as ash. At the hide's edge she knelt. Tiny rivers of turquoise threaded the rawhide, connecting spirals and arrow points. Near one corner, a bead cluster shaped a spiral within a crescent. Water coiled inside sheltering rock. The leader tapped that mark, then pointed northeast toward unseen hills. His finger traced the bead road all the way west to a broad oval stitched in sun yellow, the promise of a planting valley. Every gesture slow, as if sewing the map into memory. Josie listened with eyes. Her heart recorded what ears could not translate. When the leader finished, he unstrung a thin leather cord from his wrist. 7 shell beads, pink as sunrise. He tied them above Josie's kerchief knot, the shells settling warm against skin. Contract signed without ink. Hawthorne lifted the hide like fragile glass and bowed. A motion unused muscles remembered from peace long ago. Warriors melted back into saddle shadow. Before turning, the matron, the silver-haired woman who rode among them, stepped down. From a woven pouch, she drew a dark gourd sealed with pine pitch, placed it in the wagon master's hands. He uncorked. Rich scent of honey spilled into night, thick and wild. Matron's voice drifted, shaped by desert wind but clear. Honey remembers flowers. Feed your corn. No further instruction. She touched 2 fingers to the beads at Josie's wrist, then swung onto her horse. In a breath, the tribe slid into canyon gloom, hoofbeats fading like distant rain. Camp exhaled a breath it did not know it held. Hawthorne unrolled the hide against the wagon side, lantern light sliding over bead constellations. Settlers crowded close, suspicion drained, awe replacing it ounce by ounce. He traced the turquoise spiral, the sun-yellow oval, the threaded road. We follow. Only that. Sleep returned lighter. Josie lay beneath canvas, shells clicking a new rhythm. Dream carried her along bead roads that glowed under moon and never ran dry. Morning smeared lavender over the wash. On the ridge southeast, 8 figures on mules, miners, watched wagons pull out, surprise on their unshaven faces at the armed Apache scouts flanking canvas tops. No words exchanged. The posse reined east, dust rising behind them, but not toward the caravan. The bead map led true. By mid-afternoon, hidden springs whispered from cottonwood roots exactly where turquoise threads said they would. Barrels drank until hoops swelled, oxen splashed their own reflection. Honey spooned into each jug, swirling like captured sun. That evening, Josie helped mix cornmeal with water sweetened until it tasted of remembered kitchens. Aunt Lila tore a strip of kerchief, wiping girl's brow. Her voice, husky but softer, asked how shells feel against skin. Josie answered without stutter. Like seeds. They keep quiet until rain comes. Aunt Lila stared long, then nodded, then served the child first for the very first time. The spoonful tasted less of corn than of doorways opening. In the dark, coyotes cried but stayed distant. The desert had redrawn its borders. Above, the Milky Way stretched bead bright, an older map, but tonight it matched the hide lying safely beneath canvas, stitched by hands that understood both thirst and the mathematics of mercy. The trail climbed onto a tableland, flat as a shuttered sky. Wind quickened, carrying grit that tasted of flint. Oxen pulled steady, wagons creaked like old sermons. Yet the people inside them carried something new, an undercurrent of hum shaped by turquoise beads, sweetened water, and a map no government clerk had stamped. Fear still rode the rims of their thoughts, but it found fewer places to anchor. On the seventh evening after the water gift, camp pitched near a dry ravine striped with scrub juniper. Fire rings glowed soft. Corn mush thickened in kettles scented faintly with honey. Josie lingered by the largest pot, stirring slow circles so the sweetness would not scorch. Aunt Lila dozed beside the coals, raw weariness finally weighing heavier than grief. A sharp cry split the hush. 2 wagons down, baby Zachary, barely 4 months, arched in his mother's arms, face mottled scarlet. Sweat bead-lined his hair, yet his skin felt ice. Fever wrapped him the way dusk wraps canyon shadows, sudden and complete. Whispered alarms flickered tent to tent. Parents dreaded the word flux, that river of sickness moving faster than wagons. Hawthorne sent a rider to the nearest frontier station, 10 dusty miles east. The man galloped off under half a moon that looked too thin to grant favors. Camp watched his lantern bob until distance snuffed it. Josie hugged her knees, tasting dread beneath the honey on her lips. Midnight settled, fracturing into weak dreams. Josie woke to hoofbeats, no thunder, just a hush of pads on sand. The bead map's guardians arrived again, silhouettes brushing starlight. At their head rode the silver-haired matron. She dismounted without word, unslung a willow basket, and knelt by the sick child. From a deerskin pouch, she spilled dried rabbit brush flowers, crumbled them into the camp kettle, added water, and let the mixture simmer. Honey followed. A dark ribbon poured until steam filled air with resin and summer. She ladled a thimbleful of brew to the infant's lips. The crying ebbed to whimpers. Matron stroked the tiny chest with pine-pitch salve, humming a tune pitched lower than the wind. Mothers ringed the fire, eyes widening as sweat burst fresh on the baby's brow. By dawn, Zachary's breath settled, fluttery but sure. Fever retreated down whatever path fear had come, leaving only weakness in its wake. The matron rinsed the ladle, set it beside Josie, and pressed a twist of braided yucca cord into the girl's palm. For weaving strength, she murmured. Then she mounted and faded with her riders into first light, leaving behind baskets of willow bark, more honey sealed in wax, and a hush that tasted like awe. The wagon master tried to shape thanks, but words scattered like chaff. Instead, he unfurled the bead map on a tarp for all to see. Turquoise threads winding through canyons, bone-white peaks warning of dry ridges, sun-yellow patch promising fertile bend. Finger by finger, the settlers learned the symbols, committing them to memory as if rehearsal might summon rain. 2 afternoons later, the mining posse finally showed, a ragged band chasing rumor of silver loads. 8 rifles, 1 dynamite cart, too many empty canteens. They stopped at the sight of Apache outriders flanking canvas. One miner spat, calling it witchcraft. His leader, older, eyes fogged by dust, raised a weak truce flag. They wanted only water. Hawthorne glanced at Josie, she at the matron's empty saddle far upslope. Then he nodded. A single water skin, sweetened faintly by honey, passed from settler hands to miners. The leader drank, coughed thanks, and waved his men on. No coins changed pockets, but something heavier slipped away. An old habit of mistrust breaking off like dead branch under snow. The road dipped toward a valley rim, alluvial soil black as a stove coal. Sage thinned, rabbit grass gleamed silver. Scouts halted, raised spears in quiet salute. They had reached the sun-yellow oval of the map, Whisper Bend, a river elbow fringed by cottonwoods. Clouds bulged in the east, carrying welcome weight. That night wagons circled loosely, fires tall for once. No rationing flame. Josie walked to the riverbank, feather and yucca cord dangling from her wrist. She removed the last spoonful of honey from its jar, dripped it into the current. Golden threads spiraled, catching star glints before dissolving downstream. "Honey remembers flowers," she whispered, voice steady. When she turned, she found Hawthorne behind her, hat in hand. He pointed to the braid on her wrist. "Ready to weave a fence around hope?" She nodded, knowing fences could be made of kindness too, invisible but strong. Behind them, the first raindrops struck canvas, soft as seeds. Rain sluiced Whisper Bend through the night, beating dust into dark clay. Canvas roofs thrummed like slow drums. Wagon tongues drank runoff until iron cooled. By dawn, clouds broke eastward, revealing a valley brushed clean, every cottonwood trunk slick with mirrors, every sage head crowned in silver droplets. The river, once reluctant, now whispered eager. Settlers rose lighter, boots sinking half an inch in newborn mud. Oxen slurped puddles, snorting steam that mingled with morning mist. Hawthorne unrolled the beaded hide and pressed its damp surface flat on a crate. Turquoise water symbols glistened true beneath real sky water, as if map and land had finally shaken hands. Work began without command. Men marked a rectangle just above floodline. Women fetched spades. Children hauled slats from broken wagon crates. Josie stood at the rectangle's edge, bracelet tapping her wrist like a kindly metronome. She carried two small pouches, one of Apache corn, one of squash seeds gifted under moonlight, each kernel honey-kissed before dawn. The ground, soaked but warm, opened easily. Lines formed, paced by Josie's barefoot steps. Heel, toe, heel, each imprint filling with shining water. In each pocket she laid 3 corn seeds, pressed them with thumb, then tucked a squash seed nearer the next row, remembering the matron's words. Roots weave moisture, leaves shade thirst. Aunt Lila followed, sprinkling ash from last night's fire over each hill, charcoal freckles promising nutrients. At midday, the Apache outriders rode a wide circle around the fledgling field, spears upright, yet easy. They paused on a low ridge, observing like guardians judging castle walls, then tilted their lances outward, silent signal. Safe for now. Hawthorne raised his hat toward them. They returned a single-arm lift and disappeared beyond cottonwood fringe. Afternoon sun hardened puddle rims, just enough for wagons to roll. Some settlers argued to press west, but the beaded map urged patience. Golden oval meant stay, plant, gather strength. Hawthorne chose stillness. Wheels chalked, animals hobbled, tents stretched into something closer to permanence than any camp so far. Josie wandered riverbank, kerchief empty, yet feeling heavy with invisible crumbs. In the shallows, she found willow shoots fallen from spring surge. She cut 20 with a penknife, carried them to the field and jabbed each beside a corn mound, the beginning of a living fence. Children copied, laughter trickling like tributaries, until a green picket ringed the soil. Evening brought a hush dense as quilted wool. No scouts, no hoof rumble, only frogs newly awake testing voices. Fires flickered tall. Steam from stew scented with dried venison curled into star-bright air. Aunt Lila ladled Josie the first bowl, an unspoken apology that tasted of salt and thyme. When the pot emptied, Hawthorne produced a slim tin. Kept for occasions that lead men to tears, he joked, though his eyes glimmered already. Inside lay a length of fiddle string, rescued from a broken instrument. He restrung the weathered fiddle, tightened peg, and let bow kiss wood. Notes rose, tentative, then certain, sliding across night like water under moon. Couples swayed, children chased sparks. Fear stepped back into shadows it once ruled. Josie sat apart, bare toes tracing wet earth, bracelet shells chiming soft with music. A thought tugged. Breadcrumb seeds need songs, just as people do. She hummed the tune her mother used to cool ovens, slow, lilting. Corn hills glowed in lantern spill, and Josie imagined roots stretching, tasting honey, listening. Rain returned before dawn, a gentler percussion. At first light, Josie hurried to the field. Where she had pressed kernels only 12 hours earlier, the soil mounded higher, cracked by green spears hardly thicker than a crow's quill. Squash cotyledons pushed like folded hands opening. Drops clung to each new leaf, magnifying sunrise. She brushed a finger over one sprout. It sprang upright, as if already understanding its duty to reach skyward. Shouts brought her head up. Watch riders on the ridge again, this time waving urgency. A dust plume fanned behind them. The mining posse had doubled, now 15 rough men towing a wagon of blasting powder. Greed, stoked by rumor of hidden seams, had turned their route toward Whisper Bend. Hawthorne rallied rifles but kept them low. He turned to Josie, pointing at the sprouts. These need days, not gunfire. A plan flickered, one that traded bullets for the diplomacy of gifts. He pulled a jar of honey, half full, and a hide bundle of cornmeal. Handing both to Josie, he met her eyes. You began the treaty, maybe you close this chapter. Josie's knees quivered, yet the shells tapped calm. She took a white flag scrap, knotted jar and bundle around it, climbed the shallow rise alone. Wind tossed her braid. The posse slowed, surprised by a child where they expected warning shot. She planted bare feet firm, lifted the gifts high, letting sunlight glaze amber through glass. Behind her, in rich earth still steaming from last rain, 200 seedlings trembled, but did not bend. Dust rolled behind the miners like a second horizon, yet they slowed at the sight of one small figure holding a hungered piece. Josie stood on the rise, honey jar catching the white morning, cornmeal bundle sagging with weight beyond her wrists. Wind tugged at her calico hem, but her feet stayed planted in wet earth that still remembered yesterday's rain. The posse halted 50 yards short, sun flashed on rifle barrels, on brass buttons dulled by journey and doubt. Their trail boss, raw-boned, jaw scabbed by straight razor haste, spurred forward a single length before stopping. Hooves sank in softened clay, sound muffled as contrition. Eyes measured the girl, the gifts, the tilled field behind, then swept to the Apache outriders perched along the rim like still ribs of the earth. The riders held spears upright yet at ease. Not threat, only undeniable presence. Silence settled thick enough to taste. In that hush, Josie lowered the jar, unscrewed the waxed lid, and let a ribbon of amber spill onto the ground between factions. Honey pooled, slow and shining, a narrow river no boot dared smear. She set the jar beside it, placed the cornmeal bundle atop, and stepped back exactly 7 paces, leaving the offerings alone beneath widening sky. The trail boss dismounted. Dust slipped from coat hems that had never known polish. He crouched, pressed 2 fingers into honey, lifted them to cracked lips. Sweetness jolted across tongue used only to alkali and grit. He studied the girl once more, her empty hands, her steady eyes, and something behind his ribs found its original rhythm. He called no order, fired no gun. Instead, he turned, signaled a slow retreat. Men traded glances. Greed weighed less than this unexpected taste of mercy. One by one, they wheeled horses east, powder wagon creaking after, wheels splashing through the shallow honey line without breaking the pool. Outriders watched until dust became distance, then melted from ridgeline to join the valley hush. Josie walked down the slope, picked up jar and bundle, wiped honeyed soil from glass. Aunt Lila ran, lifted the child clear off her feet, words finally finding daylight after weeks of sorrow. Around them, settlers exhaled from places in their chests they had forgotten to unlock. They returned to planting, days folded into one long, breath-slow rhythm. Dawn watering, noon weeding, dusk singing seeds to sleep. Honey mixed with river silt at the roots. Squash leaves spread wide, shading soil until it breathed cool. Oxen regained weight. Children's laughter thickened, rolling out each evening like grain from a new elevator. Summer arced high, ears of corn fattened, tassels brushing the wagon hoops, silk shining copper at sunrise. Squash fruits swelled where vines met shade, round and dense, smelling faintly of smoke and blossoms. Hawthorne marked moon cycle after moon cycle on the wagon tongue, each notch a promise kept. When the first frost ghosted the grass tips, harvest began. Settlers and tribe worked shoulder by shoulder, blades singing through stalks, baskets filling with gold enough to argue against any winter. On the final day, a long table of plank-laid boards stretched between the wagons, every inch layered, roasted corn, squash braised with honey, venison sliced thin and bright. Apache drums sounded slow heartbeats, while Hawthorne's mended fiddle threaded a counter melody, and somewhere in the middle, both tunes wove into one line easy enough for even silence to hum. At sunset, Josie carried the very first ear she had planted, husk peeled back to reveal rows perfect as ordered stars. She set it before the silver-haired matron, who in turn laid a new bracelet of desert stones around the child's wrist. Red, turquoise, and a single bead carved from honey amber. The woman raised 2 fingers to her brow. Josie mirrored, shells clicking soft agreement. No speech followed. The field, bright under last light, spoke sufficiently for every tongue. Night rolled in velvet. Fires thinned to coals. Settlers drifted to bedrolls, full not just of food but of unlabeled peace. From the ridge a coyote sang, high and wandering. Yet even that cry sounded less lonely than usual. Josie lay beside Aunt Lila beneath wagon shade, bracelet warm against skin, the empty kerchief now serving as pillow. She closed her eyes, listening to corn leaves rustling one final lullaby, a sound like distant applause meant for anyone who had ever risked giving the last of what they had. If this journey, from a single biscuit shared beneath a parched piñon to a harvest that fed 2 worlds, stirred even a flicker in you, tap like, hitch, subscribe, and tell in the comments which moment rooted deepest. The fragile gift under killing sun, the beaded map that led through thirst, the honey against fever, or the quiet retreat of powder and greed before a child's steady hand. Your words keep the coals alive for the next traveler, seeking proof that small mercies can turn whole deserts green.